One of the big questions we have to answer in operations is when do tools matter and how do they matter? This is a framework that I use to answer that question. So let's dig in. So, first, we have the current state of the behavior. So, by behavior here, I mean we close the loop on what we try to deliver and understand whether it had the impact we wanted, or the behavior could be we challenge each other and make good prioritization decisions together. Just insert the behavior that you're thinking about into this particular framework. So here we have 5 normal states of a particular behavior and then 2 special states. So we start at not realized, aspirational only. People talk about it, but it's aspiration only. It's not happening. The next is weakly realized. We know we should, but. So this is where everyone agrees it matters. They even try to do it a bit, but it just keeps getting displaced. Next, partially realized inconsistent. So maybe it happens in pockets. There's different interpretations in a negative way. Sometimes different interpretations is a positive thing, but there's different interpretations in a negative way. It's happening locally in pockets, but you haven't really figured out how to scale it across the org. Mostly realized, but friction filled, meaning you're doing the thing, but it's kind of hard to do the thing. There's a lot of friction and manual effort to do the thing. Or it's fully realized, it's stable, it's become habit, it's embedded. There's probably not too much friction if that's happened. In some cases there is, but this is sort of the final end of the scale here. Now, there's 2 others that I include, which is actively suppressed, which means not only is the behavior not happening, but there are counter behaviors designed to actively suppress that particular behavior. So there's people saying don't do it, or creating incentives that make it almost impossible to do it. And then finally, contested undefined means people can't even agree on or maybe even describe what the behavior is or whether it's actually happening or what it even means. And so I include those. Now, the trick here is that depending on where you're at in this spectrum, and certainly over here, tools are going to play a different role. And the best way to understand this is to think about behavior design. So let's just discuss some ideas in behavior design. In COM-B, we have capability, opportunity, and motivation. And these are the things that are needed for a behavior to emerge and to stay consistent and to evolve, all that kind of stuff. And so you have psychological capability, physical opportunity, social opportunity, reflective motivation, automatic motivation, and examples here, like physical opportunity could include time, tools, systems, and workflows. Reflective motivation could include intentions, beliefs, identity, political risk, that kind of stuff. Now, there's a lot going on here, but the best way to understand this is to think about it through an example. So let's say that you have a behavior that's consistent, it's predictable, it's reliable, there's clear ownership. Pain may exist, but it doesn't really threaten the ritual. Well, in that case, the primary blockers to improvement might be the risk aversion for letting go of a good thing, environmental friction, maybe the pressure to preserve what's great about it. And there could be some manual things that make it difficult to do that thing. This is very, very different than if you had a weakly realized, we know it, but we should behavior. In this case, the kinds of blockers will be physical, lack of time, competing urgencies, motivation, habit, competition, high activation, energy, too many steps, short-term focus versus long-term value, limited self-regulation structures. There's all kinds of things that will impact the behavior when you're down in this area. And this has a lot to do with how tools can be used. Let's take another example. You have a friction-filled activity. The blockers are things like tool system constraints, limited time and resources, workflow friction. In that case, down here in this part are the sort of primary and secondary strategies that you might do. So you might remove friction and overhead, standardize some routines, make any bottlenecks or friction visible. Those are your tactics. And in this case, tools are going to play the job of removing operational drag from an already accepted workflow. That's the job of tools. Now, down here, if you're in a very aspirational mode, tools are going to play the job of transforming aspiration into repeatable practice. In this case, your strategies are provide concrete structure, visualize future desired state, encode identity and aspiration, scaffold early steps. Now, to say that tools are not important is sort of glossing over the situation here. So down here, I have tool change vectors, which means, for example, when you're trying to move a psychological capability like knowledge, mental models, or cognitive clarity, tools can influence what people understand, how they interpret tasks. The mechanisms would be clarification, instruction, cognitive offloading. And here's some examples like guided workflows or checklists embedded in the UI. Forget about products for a second. The same thing would hold true in air traffic control or flying a plane. Tools have different roles to play depending on what might be inhibiting the behaviors you want at that time. So I have all kinds of codes here for the different types of interventions: education, training, persuasion, incentivization, coercion, etc. Linking of the COM-B problems to the different behavioral interventions. I have all kinds of resources here for you to check out. The big idea here is that, through a use of behavior design and concepts from behavior design and thinking about what's getting in the way of a particular behavior from emerging, right? Is it a psychological capability, physical capability, social opportunity, reflective motivation, etc.? So to say that tools are not important is silly. It would be like saying anything is not important, because these things all work together to produce desired effects. The real crux here is that depending on the situation, tools will play a very different role. If tools are addressing social opportunity, legitimacy, and cues, then you're going to use them to create shared visibility, social proof, role alignment, depoliticizing the situation. Whereas, for example, if you're just literally in a time and resources situation, you might use the tool for automation, streamlining, and that type of stuff. This is also helpful when you think about where AI can play into all this, right? Because the use of AI to encourage the behaviors or act out the behaviors that you're hoping to happen in your company will also be highly determined by the state of the particular capability at the moment, even if maybe these behaviors are AI, for example. Hopefully this was interesting. Always stay curious.